Iron Man mentors Spider-Man, Batman shows up in a Superman movie, Alien and Predator, they don't get along. Freddy hates Jason, King Kong and Godzilla duke it out, and the good guy from M. Night Shyamalan's Unbreakable exists alongside the bad guy from M. Night Shyamalan's Split. Oh yeah, and Doctor Strange hooks Thor up with a magically refilling mug of beer. Welcome to the shared cinematic universe, which is when characters from separate movies team up in one uber franchise. You've probably noticed a lot of these lately. Marvel Studios gets a lot of credit for going big with this Hollywood formula the moment Nick Fury introduces the Avengers Initiative to Tony Stark in 2008's Iron Man.
Mr. Stark, you've become part of a bigger universe. You just don't know it yet.
But the shared cinematic universe goes back nearly 73 years with the Universal Monster series of films. Although the Universal Monster series technically began in 1923 with the Hunchback of Notre Dame, followed by the Phantom of the Opera, it was the twofer of Dracula and Frankenstein, both released in 1931, that put Universal Pictures at the head of the pack with horror cinema. The performances of Bela Lugosi as the Vampire Count and Boris Karloff as Frankenstein's monster, not to mention the direction of Todd Browning and James Whale, no doubt deserve attention for this. And the Universal Monster canon was expanded upon with, among some others we won't get into, The Mummy in 1932, The Invisible Man in 1933, and later, The Wolfman in 1941. In a proto-Marvel model fashion, Universal began seeding territory with franchises that received their own standalone sequels. 1935's Bride of Frankenstein, again directed by Whale, was the first Universal Monsters sequel and was both successful and considered even better than the original. That was followed by the less well-received, but still pretty classic in its own right, Dracula's Daughter in 1936, and Son of Frankenstein in 1939. The Mummy and the Invisible Man also got sequels. Then Universal pulled a Spider-Man, if you will, by remaking the Phantom of the Opera in 1943. But it was 1943's Frankenstein meets the Wolfman that pulled everything together. Serving as a direct sequel to The Wolfman and the fifth installment of the Frankenstein series, it was the first film to team up popular characters from different movies from the same studio. In the movie, Lon Chaney Jr.'s Wolfman, aka Larry Talbot, returns from the dead and heads to Castle Frankenstein to find a way to end his life and rid himself of the werewolf curse. He encounters Frankenstein's monster, now played by Bela Lugosi, and hijinks ensue. The movie had mixed reviews, but it was enough of a success to continue the trend. The whole thing actually started over a joke that screenwriter Kurt Siodmak told to producer George Wagner over lunch. Siodmak said that they should make a movie called Frankenstein, Wolf's the Meat Man. And surprisingly, Wagner agreed, and the movie came to life. Later, in 1943, Chaney Jr. played the Vampire Count in the standalone Son of Dracula. And then the monster in 1944's The Mummy's Ghost, making him the only actor to play all of the big four Universal monsters. Then, in December 1944, the monster mashup known as House of Frankenstein was unchained. The movie saw Chaney as the Wolfman, John Carradine as Dracula, and Glenn Strange in his first appearance as Frankenstein's monster, as well as Boris Karloff, now as a mad scientist with a hunchback henchman. And there were almost even more monsters in the movie, such as the Mummy and Invisible Man, and the Ape Woman. Interestingly, Strange was trained extensively by Karloff to portray Frankenstein's creature. As a result, his performance is almost as well remembered as his mentors. But the promise of monster battles monster paid off well enough that Universal decided to keep going, even if their monster engine was running out of steam. Less than a year after House of Frankenstein was released, House of Dracula opened in December 1945. While Karloff was out, Chaney, Strange, and Carradine returned to their roles as the Wolfman Frankenstein's monster, and Dracula. Following the film, the era of the big three Universal monsters appeared to be over. When we next encountered these characters 2.5 years later, it was as comedic foils in Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. Directed by Charles Barton, the movie divided horror fans because it effectively neuters our monster characters.
Count Dracula sleeps in this coffin, but rises every night at sunset. Chick is right. This is awful silly stuff.
But Bela Lugosi did return to his role as Count Dracula 17 years after his iconic debut as the vampire. Lon Chaney Jr. also back as the Wolfman.
Didn't Mr. Talbot tell you not to put that mask on anymore? Now what do you put it on for?
And Glenn Strange returned as Frankenstein's monster, except for a few scenes where Chaney had to step in after Strange broke his foot on set. Vincent Price even lent his voice as the Invisible Man in an uncredited cameo at the end of the film.
Allow me to introduce myself. I'm the Invisible Man.
The movie was a success and is considered a classic worthy of preservation in the National Film Registry of the U.S. Library of Congress. And it is genuinely funny. But Chaney, not a fan. He said he took the role because no one else could play the Wolfman. But he also said Abbott and Costello made, quote, buffoons out of the monsters. But hey, the set sounded fun. The production had a stand-up comic between takes to keep the energy up. And there were pie fights amongst the cast, even though Abbott and Costello never hit the monsters out of respect for their makeup. The comedy duo returned for more Universal Monster mayhem with 1949's Abbott and Costello Meet the Killer, Boris Karloff.
Now they're face to face with the king of the killers in the slap-happiest homicide in the history of mystery,
which traded in on the horror actor's notoriety in meta fashion. They then teamed up with Karloff again in Abbott and Costello Meet Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde in 1953 and would meet the Mummy in 1951. They even met the creature from the Black Lagoon on live TV during the Colgate Comedy Hour in 1954. Following the Abbott and Costello films, these creatures were firmly entrenched in spoof territory. It became commonplace to see Universal-esque monsters in a shared universe, even if they were used to comedic effect. The 1962 comedy song, The Monster Mash, imagined a party amongst the Universal monsters and utilized impersonations of Boris Karloff and Bela Lugosi.
He did the Monster Mash.
The Monster Mash.
It was a graveyard smash.
He did the mash.
And Karloff himself joined the Mad Monster Party in 1967 with the Rankin and Bass stop-motion animated movie about a gathering of the characters. Because it was produced by the same studio, the 1964 show The Munsters was able to use the Universal Monster film designs for their family of comedy monsters. Perhaps the best recent execution of a shared universe of monsters in the Universal style was 1987's Monster Squad, wherein creature makeup master Stan Winston, director Fred Decker, and writer Shane Black took the Universal monster model and brought the characters together. But it was not a true Universal monster film. There have been a few attempts over the years by Universal to reclaim the monster title with a shared universe and ongoing franchise. The Mummy franchise from 1999, starring Brendan Fraser, was a success. And the 2010 Benicio del Toro take on the Wolfman was less successful. Though Rick Baker's werewolf makeup, still gorgeous. The studio was also behind the monster team-up movie Van Helsing, starring Hugh Jackman in 2004.
Welcome to Transylvania.
The movie was directed by Stephen Sommers, who was behind the 1999 Mummy franchise. It was a box office hit that brought together Dracula, Frankenstein's monster, Jekyll and Hyde, and werewolves. But it did not launch a monster franchise. Instead, after years of planning, a new shared cinematic universe of monsters is on the cusp with the upcoming The Mummy, starring Tom Cruise. Set in modern day, the Universal Pictures film will update the mythology from the original Mummy movies. In the film, Dr. Jekyll, played by Russell Crowe, will serve as something of a Van Helsing dedicated to discovering and destroying monsters. his character will presumably open the door for a slate of interconnected films, including The Invisible Man, Bride of Frankenstein, The Creature from the Black Lagoon, and The Wolfman. Whether all the monsters will eventually share the screen to terrorize villagers, or even do the monster mash, is yet to be seen. But if Universal gets its way and audiences respond, a new era of monsters is upon us. Which Universal monsters do you want to see sharing the screen? Howl at us in the comments below.